You're 59 and a half and nearly all of your money is in pre-tax accounts like a 401k or IRA. You've done everything right. But now you're wanting to retire and start drawing down that money. You're dealing with taxes and you're trying to do all this while still trying to protect your nest egg. And for many people with this amount in a pre-tax retirement account, their retirement income could easily get hammered by taxes later on in retirement if they don't plan properly. So in this video, I'll show you how to draw down from pre-tax accounts and make your money last if you do retire early, the tax traps that most people miss and how they can quietly drain your wealth if you don't pay attention to them, and the portfolio shifts to think about so your money survives retirement. And we're going to walk through a case study to bring it all to life. Now, if you're someone that's about to retire at this age and you're mostly pre-tax, why is planning so important? Why is this age such an interesting milestone? Well, let's look at a couple, Mark and Mary, not real names. He's 59 and a half, she's 58. They've done everything right. They live in a high cost city and they built about $3 million in a traditional IRA. Now, their goal is to retire at the start of 2026. That gives them a few short months until retirement. They're really targeting about $14,000 a month in net spending after taxes and in order to cover health insurance, travel, and all the other classic expenses that they have. Now, here's where the first major mistake happens if you're considering retire early and or you have all your money in pre-tax accounts. And this was an assumption by Mark and Mary. Now, they figured a 5.5% withdrawal rate on $3 million is enough to get to their spending need, and they'd be quite close. But that's before taxes. If they actually want to spend $168,000 per year net, their gross withdrawals are actually to be closer to $200,000 per year. Now we're closer to 6.5% as far as the withdrawal rate, and that paints a very different picture. Now, historically, what we know is that safe withdrawal rates are rarely below 5%. Like the worst case is in the 1960s, or did fall below that rate. And that research is hindsight, obviously. Nobody truly knows the future. But what actually clicked for Mark and Mary wasn't finding the perfect withdrawal rate. It's realizing that they didn't need to find the perfect withdrawal rate because they were willing to be flexible. And this is super important if you're somebody that retired early, is understanding what your minimum essential expenses is without some of the extras. Now, this came out to about $10,000 a month after tax. So here's what we did. If markets drop, they reduce withdrawals by 5%. But if markets rebound, then they just dial it back up, back to their regular spending. They're building a dynamic plan, not like a rigid one, and that can give you more flexibility to make things work. So, of course, the real key isn't just accounting for taxes. That, of course, is a big mistake to miss, but it's about building flexibility into your spending plan. And that's what turns a $3 million pre-tax portfolio into more than enough for early retirement. But let's add another lever, especially relevant to someone like Mark and Mary that want to retire at 59 and a half. And they have years to go until full retirement age for Social Security. Now, most people might be alarmed when they see that, oh, they might withdraw 6.5% from their retirement accounts. And I can completely understand why, but it only applies in the years before benefits begin. Once Social Security kicks in, you reduce your portfolio withdrawals because Social Security replaces a good portion of that portfolio income. So timing becomes everything. But before we get into the claiming strategies, let's be clear. Delaying Social Security increases your total lifetime benefit if you live long enough. The longer you wait, the higher the check. But what if there's more than just a break-even chart? Now, for Mark, his thoughts were, hey, I'm delaying until age 70, I get that 8% bump, and I'm going to get my maximum benefit. And he's thinking long-term about locking in a guaranteed tax-efficient inflation-adjusted income for the rest of your life. And he's not wrong. And the other layer here is that he's the higher earner, which means if he passed away first, Mary steps into his full benefit as survivor. So delaying doesn't just help Mark, it helps both of them. Now, Mary sees the other side. What if they both pass early? They have spent down their portfolio to delay a benefit that they never really lived to enjoy. And this is where most Social Security analysis stops. But the real risk isn't just lifespan, it's sequence of returns. Now, first we need to talk about the math. After full retirement age, benefits grow by about 8% per year until age 70. And research shows that delaying from age 62 to 66 delivers a real return of roughly 4.3% for men and 4.9% for women. Now that's strong, especially considering the inflation adjustment and the backing by the government. But here's the catch. Those gains only matter if you live to collect them, and they don't come free. Now, delaying means leaning a little bit harder into your portfolio in those earlier years. Now, that could be fine in a bull market, but what if the year you retire looks a little bit more like 2008? So let's compare the two options for Mark and Mary with their pre-tax balance and income goals of about $14,000 net after tax per month. And let's compare if they delay Social Security to age 70 versus taking it at 62 and retire in a down market, considering using, for example, a 75-25 allocated portfolio Of course, as you know, this is not investment advice. Now, here at the top, you can see that if claiming age for Mark is 70 in January 2036 and for Mary is January 2037, lifetime benefits will be about $1.9 million, which is 100% of the total maximum. So let's look at their income experience beginning before the dot-com bubble, March of 1999. The blue line is where their withdrawal rate would be had they delayed to age 70, versus the yellow line is where their withdrawal rate had to be if they'd taken Social Security early. Now, right away, if they were to retire before the dot-com bubble, we could see that the rates were pretty neck and neck in the simulation until the great financial crisis happens. Now, you could see that withdrawals from the portfolio spike upwards of 18.5% compared to 11% if they had started early. Now, both the strategies work, the portfolio lasts, but this is where, yes, delaying looks great on a break-even analysis, but when markets drop, early claiming can actually preserve the portfolio and help with those sequence of returns risk. As we can see, they have more left over at the end of their life if you compare the two strategies. This is why it's a perfectly okay decision if you decide to take it early. Not because it's going to maximize every single dollar, but it gives you peace of mind. And for them, they were a little bit more on the conservative side, and they like the idea that, hey, maybe we might leave a little bit more for our kids. So this is where the conventional advice gets it half right. Yes, delaying Social Security can be optimal on paper, but if you want psychological breathing room, especially in a down market, earlier claiming isn't just reasonable, and it might actually be smart in that decision. And you can always take the wait and see approach to taking Social Security depending on how markets and how life unfolds. But even with Social Security optimized and withdrawal rates in mind, Mark and Mary still face one massive puzzle. I think most of us would be surprised by estimating the amount we will pay in taxes over the course of your lifetimes. But over their retirement, we could see that they were on track to pay over $1.8 million in lifetime taxes. Particularly if you're someone similar to Mark and Mary and you run the actual numbers, you're going to start to see a little bit of an interesting theme here, especially when it comes to withdrawals between 59.5 to 75. Now, for them, Mark and Mary have a unique window, retiring early. They know they're in good shape with claiming, with their withdrawal strategy. They have no salary, no Social Security, and no RMDs yet, and full account access. That creates what we call a Roth conversion opportunity, but not necessarily without trade-offs. If we do start conversions early and we aim at the second IRMA bracket, we reduce future RMDs and potentially increase their legacy value. On paper, the plan added a little over $300,000 in projected value in today's dollars in tax savings. But now let's look at withdrawals. To fund those conversions and pay the tax, their withdrawal rates would jump to about 7.2%. Now, that's what many people ignore is paying the tax, you're having to take slightly higher withdrawals. Now, even if the math checks out when you're running an analysis like this, the psychological effects are real. Now, you're spending more in the first decade of retirement than you plan, all to reduce taxes 20 years down the line. And for many retirees, over front loading, doing major Roth conversions just does not feel as sustainable. So instead, we adjusted. Instead of pushing for really heavy Roth conversions in the early years, we pulled back and we shifted to smaller, later conversions, still within the tax efficient window, but without putting too much pressure too early on if they retire early. And by pacing out the Roth conversions, Mark and Mary could still reduce lifetime taxes, lower future RMDs, and also leave a net legacy to their kids without putting too much stress on the portfolio in the years that matter most. And lastly, all this withdrawal planning, tax planning can be a complete waste if you don't survive retirement. So let's talk about what we did to structure the portfolio for Mark and Mary. Now, the good news about having all your money in pre-tax accounts is reallocating the portfolio retirement can be done right away with no tax consequences because the money stays within the IRA, which is unlike, for example, if you have a taxable account that has large capital gains. So first, what we wanted to do was build a war chest, right? 3 to 5 years of spending in cash and bonds, that gives them a buffer during those down markets. Now, if you look at their plan and we look at projected withdrawals, that's going to look about $1 million in the war chest if we just look at total withdrawals over the next 5 years. So if we look at big picture, that's about 33% or so in high quality bonds and short-term cash for that war chest. Now, secondly, let's talk about the other 67% of the portfolio, which will be in some of the world's greatest companies, adding international, small cap, emerging markets. And by adding different return streams, you start to reduce your reliance on any one single outcome becoming a detriment to your retirement. For example, many of you know, but retiring in the early 2000s, if you owned something only like S&P 500, you would have had a great deal of pressure built on those dollars. Now, in your working years, that's great. You're adding dollars, but not so great if you're relying on that for income. During this period of time, there were negative returns. Now, thirdly, we want to look at the cost. Now, mutual funds come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them are a little bit more costly than you would expect. Now, if he wanted to just mirror the S&P 500, he could also do so for a lower cost. Now, for example, like an ETF that has a 0.18% expense ratio, and that one adjustment alone could be about $24,000 a year in savings. Now, costs aren't everything. You want to make sure you're getting value for that fund or whatever mutual fund or ETF you use. But even going beyond that, you build a great portfolio for a reasonable cost. And when it comes to building a well allocated portfolio in retirement, it isn't just about returns. It's about how you get those returns and align your portfolio for the amount of income that you are prepared to take. Now, the key to making this all work is not just having the most optimal plan on paper, it's about having a plan you can actually follow, having a plan that relates to real life goals, real life emotions, rather than just looking at a spreadsheet. Now, for Mark and Mary, we made some trade offs, right? They accepted Social Security benefits now in exchange for more portfolio stability. They also delayed Roth conversions to avoid spending anxiety and having too high of a withdrawal rate earlier on. And lastly, we built that war chest, not just for returns, but for peace of mind and to protect their portfolio during inevitable bear markets. So at the end of the day, having those three moves, right, having a withdrawal strategy, having a tax plan, and having the appropriate portfolio can start to put you in a position where retiring early is much more possible. But we just walked through a case study how Roth conversions can play a major role in reducing future taxes and potentially increasing your legacy value if done right. But what if the timing is wrong? What if doing a Roth conversion actually costs you more in taxes, Medicare premiums, or missed deductions? Now, that's also another case that we need to talk about. So watch this video next to uncover 10 real life scenarios where actually not converting to a Roth IRA saves people thousands of dollars and how to know if any of these might apply to you. Once again, this is Matt Calcagno with One Degree Advisors. If you'd like to talk to me or someone on my team about your plan to retire early, click the link in the description below and we'd love to chat with you.